Welcome, everyone, to today's talk on code assessment reviews for mergers and acquisitions, specifically on how SBOMs can move beyond producing inventory to assisting with better transaction decisions for M&As. So I'll be taking there are multiple participants with an M&A transaction. So I'll mostly be taking a frame of reference of an assessment team's side, working with the buyers of a transaction. So with that, a little bit about myself. I am Prashant Chandrasekhar. I work for Bitsy. We work on the SCA and AppSec space, helping companies identify third-party software risk and vulnerability implications. Quite a bit of my work is centered around M&A due diligence, assisting with companies. So I just want to take a quick moment here to explain why M&A reviews are different before going into our session today. So in a regular SCA or an AppSec program, you have plenty of time at hand, and there's software resource availability also at hand. This is something that you don't have with the luxury you don't have with an M&A. There's limited visibility. There's buyers don't have access to the code. They don't have access to developers under confidentiality restrictions. And then, obviously, time is, its clock is ticking. So you have to wrap up the deal within a few weeks before making a decision. And in comes the assessment team. They assemble all data, evidence, SBOMs, vulnerability lists, any sort of communication data from the target team, which is the acquired company. And from then, they're going to be answering very different questions for different stakeholders. The CFOs are looking at okay, is there any deal economics changes? Very, very high level. And then you have the security teams and the integration teams that are looking at, okay, what would the post-close roadmap look like? So more sort of lower level items here. So there are multiple stakeholders here, and your outcomes need to support everyone. So with these constraints in mind, I'd like to take you through a typical timeline of an M&A review. So first, the assessment team comes in, and then discuss that with the target on the scope of the review. So basically, products and distribution models and artifacts are discussed, and then from then on, there's the inventory or the SBOM generation stage where there's code scans and package discoveries, so on, and then comes the meat of the review process. There is the prioritization and confirmation. So you want to go from an inventory dump into a list of actionable items. So how do we do that? You prioritize that with the target. And then finally would be the readout stage where remediation actions are put forth back to the buyer. And with review outcomes, mostly of one of these possible four that I would categorize as, it's either an accept, which is going to be post-closing fixes, which has more time, gate or covenants for which need to be addressed before close, and that will also be included as part of contracts with the acquisition. And then pricing, if there's any deal economics that gets changed, commercial agreements come into place. And then in certain rare cases, the deal is just stopped. I mean, the criticality is high, so deal doesn't go through. So the next stage again would be generating inventory. So this is where you get the SBOM, your components, dependencies, where it's found. So this is very useful. Again, the SBOM answers as to what is inside the product. But it's still, and mainly source-side SBOMs are lacking a lot of decision context. There is, you don't know where the component is being used. The distribution reachability, exploitability, provenance. It's still a lot of these questions are unanswered. And finally, but again, the outcome is that you want a a defensible, action-oriented report for the buyer to make decisions on. So, and with the with regards to validating again, so you've generated an SBOM. There's some concerns always with regards to how accurate an SBOM is, and you need to go back and fix again. You have to look at the code scan outputs once again to sort of address these coverage gaps and any noisy vulnerability matches or false positives or any license ambiguities where any no assertions or multiple licenses need to definitely be fixed. And then so I would definitely say these are some of the challenges with regards to the SBOM validation state, especially for a time-bound M&A. You don't want to miss out on the accuracy and the cleanliness. So once we've, let's say we've received a validated inventory, so you have, SBOM with evidence. So you want to score your risk into sort of action items here. So what factors do I usually look for scoring the signal? And again, this all comes from confirmation with the target as well, because they're the ones who write the code. So there is, again, definitely license impact and CVEs and exploitabilities are one, probably the top of the tree. Business criticality, I mean, so is this component, is this issue a part of the secret sauce or the core product? And then is there any barriers to the fixes? And also as to who owns that particular fix, and are those developers visible to this transaction, again under confidentiality restrictions? That's from the execution readiness point of view. And then from here, once you get the score, you again transform it into buckets of actions. Action items is one of accept or gate or price or pause. So I have a few examples here of turning as to how items from an SBOM convert into like action items for the readouts. So first example would be something like, okay, so let's say you have a snippet of code from some unknown licensed blog articles or some forum articles that is part of a distributed product. So the action item is very clear here. There's only a few snippets of lines of code, and so the target cleans this up or replaces this up before close and provides the proof. So it's part of the contract, and they need to complete this before close. So very straightforward here. Again, very credible replacement path available as well. Another example would be a sort of a distributed transitive vulnerability issue. Say something like if you have a document parsing stack like Apache Tika, for instance, brings in the Apache Commons compress with vulnerabilities, and then so now the question becomes, okay, are the uploaded files by the end user reachable to the Commons compress vulnerabilities here? So this so the level of exposure here determines sort of the action item here. So if it is exposed, then you might want to make the fixes quickly prior to close, or else it can be marked a track later one. Another example I have is for a gating before close is where if you have something like a Redis where there's actions for license obligations that can produce some challenges with regards to security or other constraints. So, let's say you have readers with a server-side public license, which is something that buyers are not very comfortable with, and so they would want to. The action would be to replace, in most cases, with an alternative val key. But then it still has to be evaluated carefully. You would want to see how the support will that even technically work for for the target, and also support and migration and operational model, will that all fit post closing? So as long as a forward direction is agreed upon, this will again this will be a pre-close, and mainly because Redis is it's mainly used for like caching or some basic product functions. So mostly we see buyers marking this as a sort of a gate item prior to close. And in certain rare cases, yeah, deals get paused because of, again, bigger issues. In certain cases, it's a vulnerability. So I have this example of an XZ utils backdoor vulnerability. Let's say that there's a deployed appliance or a server that contains these affected versions of XZ utils. So it's not just a normal dependency vulnerability. I mean, the whole sort of deployed artifacts are now, the trust now comes under question. So the action would be to, again, so unless target verifies that all these the versions are replaced, this is now it's now the deal is now paused till confirmation there. And so now this is just what now we start from an SBOM, and we go to a to a readout call with just a few bullet items for enough for a call. So, and another point for assessment teams is that I usually mention that it's always better to only include evidence and implications and options for both the target and the buyer. Never put forth never make any legal conclusions, because that would again go to the legal teams from the buyer side. You don't want to play lawyers, so. And some projects from OpenSSF that definitely help the whole review process. Is again, I have a few here. Software and inventory with BOMCTL and SBOMit and various other tools, which sort of bridges the gap between SBOM generation analysis tools and Guac, which again helps connect SBOMs and dependencies into sort of into a graph. Again, helps us understand how where a particular dependency is present, Guac. And again, scorecard and all-star for health checks. Salsa and Sigstore for artifact trustworthiness. And again, there's also OSPS baseline, which is again very useful from both the sides, buyer, seller sides, for sort of a control framework on what it looks like in the future. So with these OpenSF projects, they don't replace the review. It sort of enriches the evidence stack that you're building. So if a seller has these already ready, right, just assists the transaction much better, and it moves at a faster pace. So I'll leave you with this today. In a transaction, buyers don't just acquire software; they also inherit the supply chain risk. So I mean, SBOMs, okay, are useful, but they help us see the risk. But again, the evidence stack and the SBOMs, plus the SBOMs, help us act on it. So thank you, everyone. Any questions?
I understand that commercially why it's a very different business to have a 2-week turnaround time and a lot of money at stake and M&A review, and you have even less access to the data than usual.
Right.
But does this exist either within BITS or elsewhere, in your mind, on a continuum with the more ordinary vendor security questionnaires and any third-party risk management program? Like some of the ways in which it either is similar or different from the kinds of questions you should ask about anytime you're doing a deal with another SaaS provider.
No, in many cases, it's in fact the same. There's questions on patch management policies and open source training. I mean that's one of again with limited visibility. People, buyers want to know. Okay, so is there a framework already in place? Because that would answer your 80-90% of your problems, and and it's just the same with other, as you mentioned, vendors and other vendor questionnaires applicable to.